Hi guys, I'm Shmee, hello and welcome back to the channel where today we need to talk about the next Shmeemobile for sale and exactly why. Now I discussed recently that I'm going to be saying goodbye to a couple of the cars from the collection for a host of different reasons, new arrivals, recent acquisitions, plans, other ventures, but also just the general costs with the barn, the team and everything we've got going on. So today that means taking a car to go and drop it off to say farewell, a last drive if you will, and the car in question is going to be my lovely midnight blue 2011 Aston Martin DBS. We're going to be taking it to McGurk Performance Cars from where I bought it a little over half a year ago. I've had a lot of fun with the car and I want to talk more about that and exactly why that is the choice for today. It won't be the last car to go, but today is about dropping it off, about the final goodbye to the DBS. So let's get on with it. Let's come over to the car in question, the stunning Aston Martin DBS. And I know what you're thinking, why would I do this? Because this is one of the best looking cars ever, one of the most beautiful Aston Martins. It was also a Bond car, and the icing on the cake is that it's in midnight blue. Now I bought the DBS on a bit of a whim. You might remember having bought back my original Shmeemobile, the V8 Vantage Roadster last year. At the start of this year, we took it to McGurk Performance Cars to undergo some extensive restoration works. And while it was up there, I went for a walk around of their showroom and stumbled upon this. Now the DBS is crazy pretty in any color scheme, but they tend to be in grayscale colors only. Black, dark gray, silver, perhaps white, sometimes in green or red, and a couple of them in a color like this, midnight blue. And this was a car that for me was an itch I needed to scratch, and petrol heads amongst you will understand that, and I want to explain a bit more about it, how this happened, why this happened, but why it's now going to be leaving as well. So if we rewind back a bit, the backstory behind buying a DBS was that my first ever car I had owned was a Renault Clio. I had also bought a Subaru Leon because I was spending a lot of time in New Zealand. I upgraded the Clio to a 1 Series, then to an Audi S5. But when I was lucky enough to be in a position to purchase my first, let's say, serious sports car, as a Brit growing up here, fan of James Bond, it had to be an Aston Martin, and I bought this 4.7 litre facelifted 2009 V8 Vantage Roadster. This was the original Shmeemobile. It was the first car that I had ever revealed on the Shmee 150 channel. It was the first car that I was ever driving when I spoke on camera for the first time, sat in that seat right there. I'd bought it in 2010, drove it I think 16,000 miles or so before I sold it in 2012. But like all petrol heads, I was constantly thinking, what's going to come next? And I was aspiring to upgrade it to a DBS or perhaps to a DBS Volante. But when it came time to sell this, it was worth approximately £55,000, that kind of thing. And a DBS Volante at the time was still into six figures, just over £100,000, which was out of reach for me. I couldn't stretch that far. So I bought instead an R8 V10 Spider, which was about £80,000 worth back then, in fact. So I'd always wondered about it. And if you then fast forward a few more years, what actually happened is that came along. Aston Martin introduced the final derivative of the 4.7 litre naturally aspirated V8 Vantage, the GT8, limited to only 150 cars. And I purchased that as a bit of a tribute back to my original car, but also because it's just me in every possible way. Shortly after purchasing this, and it's funny how all of these things often link together, I then bought from the same salesman a Vanquish Volante. I had still been thinking about buying a DBS, but a rather lovely Vanquish Volante, facelift with the new 8-speed gearbox, carbon edition, came up for sale. And I was like, let's do this. Let's do the double Aston Martin thing. So the Vanquish happened. And again, I kind of stepped past the DBS, if you will. I just kind of missed it out, even though I had always wanted to experience it. Then last year, at the start of 2021, when I was spending a lot of time in the USA when I bought the GT500, prior to that, I'd been driving around a lot in my friend Freddie Tavarish's Aston Martin DBS, but his was a manual, and I'd still been thinking more about it. So I'd driven maybe 1,000 miles or so in total on his manual. And then all of this just came together. When this car was sitting at McGurk, it was kind of like, let's just do this. Like I said, an itch that needed to be scratched. So I purchased the Aston Martin DBS a little over 6 months ago or so. Since then, I've driven it a bit over 2,000 miles. And you have to remember, a car like this has only done around 2,000 miles a year for the whole of its life. It's 11 years old. It's actually just shy of 30,000 miles now, so a touch more than that. But many of these cars don't do so many miles. They're special cars to enjoy owning, to enjoy experiencing, and I'm lucky to experience a lot of different things. And in fact, since buying this car, we've done a lot of paint work. We made sure that we would get it completely right. It's been to Topaz, so we've got the front end and sills, basically vulnerable area paint protection film package. It's in perfect working order and shape. It's a car that was serviced just prior to when I picked it up from McGurk, because they do the work obviously there, and in fact they had sold it to the previous customer as well. It's had a couple of owners, as all of these things often have. But I bought it not really knowing what my long-term plan was going to be with the DBS, but wanting to try it. And I think that's a big part of these kind of cars. And I meet people who have bought and sold countless cars just to experience the different ones and what they're like at any level. It doesn't have to be things like this. And in fact, these are remarkable value. This kind of car on the nice side of £80,000 with a 6-litre V12, what more could you ask for? But I have to be honest, and you'll have seen this in the videos with this car, to me, it's much more what it looks like and what it is to own than, let's say, what it is to drive. I found it a little bit too much of a, I want to say, lazy GT for my liking. You'll have seen that in the videos when I took it over to Germany. It's a wonderful Grand Touring cruiser, but it doesn't have the excitement levels that I wanted it to have, that I wanted it to bring to the table. I drove a pretty docile Nürburgring lap with the car and enjoyed it an awful lot doing that, and obviously had it on the Autobahn as well. By modern standards, a little over 500 horsepower in a fairly heavy car, despite the full carbon fiber bodywork, is not particularly quick either. And as I said recently, you know, here at the garage, there are a lot of costs. We're in a period of great uncertainty at the moment, and I've bought far more cars in the last year and a bit than I intended to. The collection, including long-term test cars and things, I think in the last 15 months has grown by 16 cars or so. A couple have departed, but not all that many. With the arrival of the Zenvo, the STO, the GT Black Series, the SF90, the Lusso, etc., the biggest ticket car to leave was the AMG GT R Pro to date, and that's mathematically never going to work out. You can't have, well, I can't have, for sure, let's say £3 million worth of cars coming in or more with only a couple of 100,000 going out in a single year. That's never quite going to add up, not to mention the expenses and expanding the barn and having the team and all of the employees and so forth that we have for all of our operations. So I had to choose something that was going to go, and I decided and settled on the DBS, not because I want to sell it. I think there's a decent chance I might own another one at some point in the future, but because timing right now, looking around and choosing between the cars, regretfully, this one has to go. So today, the plan is to talk a little bit more about this while we get on the road, get it started up, enjoy that V12 for the last time, to take the DBS up back to McGurk Performance Cars, where it will be advertised going forwards for sale. So let's crack on with this. There are some really lovely details when it comes to this car. The ECU, the glass crystal key that you have for it, and just the overall elegance of it. There's not much like this, you know, swan doors that open up, a really high quality interior, which is still in immaculate shape as well. And then, obviously, there is the sound that it makes. Foot on the brake, key in, and it does this. Which is glorious. It's absolutely glorious. We are in a bit of traffic, but quite amusingly, the second car we've brought behind us is the GT4 Lusso. And the reason that is amusing is because the day we went to get this car was a day or two after picking up the Lusso. So the Lusso came up to McGurk on collection of the DBS, and it's coming up now on, you could say, return of the DBS as well. Driving it though, this is what's quite interesting. You know, at the moment we're in manual on the paddle shifters. You've got the 6-speed auto box, which I think suits the car better than the manual. I know that's a big topic because the manuals of these are worth £20,000–30,000 more than the automatics, and obviously in higher demand. But for me, this kind of lazy, low revving V12 suits the character of a cruiser. And if you're going to have a cruiser, it doesn't really make sense to try and make that into a sports car. A sports car is something normally that's lighter and nimbler, and I'm holding the gear because the road's going to open up here, and then we can have a whole load of V12. It's super torquey and gets a move on very, very nicely, and I will miss driving it because it's a really lovely car. It's a really, really lovely car, but like I said, it's kind of one of those push comes to shove and something has to go, and right now I've got 3 Aston Martins, they're all blue. I'm quite happy with the other 2, which present a nice mix of cars, so I'm happy to, well, I'm not happy, but I'm least unhappy, shall we say, that the DBS is going to be setting off from the garage. While we're just cruising along, to think a little bit more about selling cars, if we rewind back, you know, 5 to 8 years ago, I actually had kind of a car for a year, and I like changing cars, so I liked every 12 months or so selling the car and purchasing something new. But because obviously I spend every minute driving and doing all sorts of crazy things, it means the lifespan of a car that I own is accelerated like crazy. Within the first couple of months, I've probably done more with it than most people would ever do with these kind of things. If you take cars like the SF90, the STO, the Ford GT, the Senna, the amount of things that my cars have done, like track days, road trips, Nürburgring, places that they've been, is just unreal how fast it all happens. And obviously the AMG GT R Roadster has recently departed, that's for sale. This is going. Probably 1 or 2 more cars will depart from the Shmeemobiles, but don't forget also there are quite a few other cars still to come in. We need to have the Zenvo delivered to the Shmuseum, we need to have the new Lotus Emira arriving, plus we have the GT Black Series, which is in the USA, the GT500, which is now in the UK but has never been to my garage, the Clio V6, which is being worked on and should be back quite soon, the F1 car that's being worked on and will be back quite soon as well, plus who knows what else down the line. So 6 more cars to come into the garage. Even if we have another 2 going out, it's still going to be getting quite busy around those parts, hence having all of the Benpack Auto Stacker lifts installed. But as last drives go, considering the weather today, the sunshine, the nice, fairly chilled drive to be honest, not too busy, sometimes a bit of traffic, mostly just cruising, letting this car do literally what it's for, being on cruise control as we waft up the motorway with the Lusso in tow to continue from McGurk's. Could be worse, hey, could be worse. I've had fond memories, and that's sometimes an important thing as well, that you enjoy everything you do with a car, and then it just becomes time, you know? Sometimes it's just time to move it along. And I know this car was quite a personal choice. It was never really one of the biggest, most exciting cars, I think, for the channel. Something that Damon and the Daily Driven Exotics guys are often talking about, as I referenced recently as well, and especially with Damon selling his Carrera GT, is that sometimes mixing things up, rotating things is good for the videos, it's good just personally, it's quite fun, and it's just kind of a byproduct of car collecting. You find cars that you love and you want to keep a hold of forever, like my 675 and my GT8s and all the things, but sometimes something that you really hope was going to be amazing just isn't quite you, isn't quite right, and it's time to move it to a new home. So that's basically what's brought us to where we are now. It's driving on lovely countryside lanes like this on a beautiful afternoon. We're actually around the corner from the Aston Martin HQ in Gaydon, which is where of course all the modern Astons, including all 3 of mine, have been assembled. Prior to this, the flagship was the original Vanquish. That car was actually made in Newport Pagnell at the old location, which is now Aston Martin Works. But this is where you just enjoy the drive. It's not a car to absolutely hoon down these kind of lanes. It's a car to drive like this. Just waft, enjoy, have that sound in the background, and just be out for the ride. You know, just enjoy what it's all about. And I'm not saying that I'll never own another DBS. I wouldn't be too surprised if I do buy another one down the line. But for now, it's, as I said, that box that I've ticked, that itch that needed a scratch. It's that feeling of, I've had some fun, I've enjoyed it, but it's time to let something go, and needs must and all, and sadly, that means this time around at least, it is going to be the DBS that is departing. But for a last drive on a beautiful day like today, couldn't really ask for more. We're only a few minutes away now from McGurk Performance Cars, where the car will be sold. Just these downshifts. Not the fastest shifts, it's nothing like a new dual clutch gearbox, but boy does it sound good with the V12. I think actually the last time that I was here was when we came to pick up this car. We'd completed all of the maintenance with the Vantage Roadster, and we'd come up with the Lusso, and of course that was to collect the DBS. So we will pull in just here, and on our left are some lovely Aston Martins. We'll get this parked up and go in and have a chat. But yeah, that is the end, we could say, of my tenure as the owner of this particular Aston Martin DBS, just shy of 30,000 miles on it. ready to be parked and for us to say farewell to this lovely example. To be honest, as DBSs go, it's a really nice car. They all need things. They all need things to be done, from paintwork to maintenance. And this has been par for the course. So, key out, time to go hand this over. And then we'll be hopping on board the Lasso for the onward journey from here. It's dangerous coming here, just having a quick look around the showroom at some of the beautiful cars on display, starting with a Vantage N430 just there with the bright yellow accents. A midnight blue Vantage as it happens, obviously all of the different types of cars, generations of cars. That silver with red interior Vanquish is really nice. This is obviously spectacular, the DB5 Vantage. Saw this car when I came before, had a full set of works to it, really, really beautiful condition. In fact, up on the wall there is the original bumper from before all of that work was done. This is unusual, Vanquish in apple tree green, as it happens. There were 8 cars in this colour. It's the only right-hand drive, the other 7 are all left-hand drive, and it was the car that Marek Reichman was taking to different events when it was launched to kind of introduce and really launch the Vanquish. I actually love that, even though it's really quite an unusual colour. Plenty of other cool stuff. There's a manual DBS here. Obviously, as I said earlier, DBS is normally in different grayscale colours. Slight blue tinge, I think that must be lightning silver perhaps, which suits it really nicely, it has to be said. XJ220, right-hand drive, one of only 69 right-hand drive XJ220s that were made. I'm just spotting, you know, the different Vantage iterations and things as we come through. We've got the Rapides, everything all the way up, all of the different models, which is super nice. V12 Vantage just there. That's an original V12 Vantage coupe with the original V12 wheels, manual, same engine as the DBS, the 500 or so horsepower, 6 litre naturally aspirated V12. Special, but dangerous place this. Coming here, you can definitely get carried away. So before that happens, because that's not the purpose for today, I should probably exit. But if you're interested in something from here, you know where to find them, McGurk Performance Cars. I suppose this means it is time now, though, to hand over the keys to this magnificent Aston Martin DBS, a car that, if you rewind back a decade, was really one I lusted after back then. I've been able to, as I've said, sorry, too many times, scratch that itch, own and experience the car, get a feel for what it's all about, and truly enjoyed doing so in the process. Perhaps it was bought a little bit spur of the moment, I think we can argue, but with things going the way they have, needs must and all, it's time for it to find a new home, and that is exactly what it's here for. So thank you for joining the journey with the Aston Martin DBS. There will be plenty more very exciting things down the line, believe me, but for today, that is all. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you again very soon. Cheers!